Hello and welcome to Season 1, Episode 6 of the Financial Planner Marketing Playbook from Bamford Media. I'm your host, Martin Bamford. In this episode of the Financial Planner Marketing Playbook, we're talking about change and how to outsmart it. A change in management, the arrival of a new competitor, market consolidation, a disappointing quarter, or a new direction for your business can all disrupt our best laid plans. How we respond to unexpected change can determine our success or failure. My guest today, marketing veteran Engelina Jaspers, is a student and teacher of business and career agility. Her book, Marketing Flexology, is a step-by-step guide to creating a dynamic and resilient marketing organisation that can withstand change, disruption and transformation. As a former Vice President of Marketing and Vice President of Sustainability for Fortune Global companies, Engelina knows that delivering tangible business results is crucial, not only to the success of your organisation, but to the success and longevity of your career too. As financial planners, we're all well used to change. We often experience change in regulation, investment markets, and client expectations. Engelina's message is that we shouldn't waste another good crisis by being underprepared. It's the time to future-proof your career, your team, and your marketing platform. If you want to learn more about this podcast and the work we do at Bamford Media, as well as find some useful resources for this episode, you can visit bamfordmedia.co.uk/podcast. Here's my conversation with Engelina Jaspers, author of Marketing Flexology, in Season 1, Episode 6 of the Financial Planner Marketing Playbook from Bamford Media. So welcome to the podcast. Could I start by asking you just to give us a brief introduction, who you are, what you do?
Sure. Good morning, Martin. So pleased to be here. So I am Engelina Jaspers, and I am a 30-year corporate marketing veteran, having survived revolving door CEOs, management changes, upheavals, and lots of transformations. So I'm still in the corporate world, but more on a assignment basis now than in the day-to-day grind. And in between, I've had an opportunity to write a book. So I'm happy to share some of that knowledge and some of the experience, lessons learned that I've learned throughout my 30 years on the front lines of transformation and change.
Well, I'm really looking forward to chatting about the book. It's called Marketing Flexology. We've seen many famous brands lose their way over the years because they were quite resistant to making changes. What do you think makes businesses become so complacent and just fail to adapt to a changing marketplace?
You know, it's sad actually to see once iconic brands fade into the sunset, either entirely or really as a reduced fraction of themselves. You know, you think back to E.F. Hutton or TWA or General Foods, Borders, Circuit City, Blockbuster. You know, these were brands that once were household names, but not anymore. So, what makes businesses become complacent? You know, Andy Grove, the co founder and former CEO of Intel, wrote a book, and I'd have to agree with his philosophy. He said that success breeds complacency, and complacency breeds failure. And he said the title of his book was Only the Paranoid Survive. And I think those are still good words to manage by today.
That's a really strong message. What are some of the factors and some of the changes that you think disrupt a business journey?
Well, obviously, there are external forces. You know, there could be a technology disruption, a competitive advance, entry of a new market player, a market consolidation. And, you know, each of these can spark a business transformation or disrupt the business journey. But a business journey can also be disrupted by a change in business model. For instance, a result of a company going through an acquisition, a merger, divestiture, or it could be part of a company's natural evolution from startup phase to IPO to maturity. And a change in management, you know, can also disrupt a business journey, especially if the new CEO is brought in from the outside. You know, that's often a signal that a company has lost its way, needs to grow in a new direction, or requires a reset. And I found that turnover at the top almost always sparks an upheaval, but it could also lead to opportunity.
Mm. And these changes, they're a constant, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. They're never ending. And we just have to be prepared to stay one step ahead of it.
What's the role now of marketing in corporate America, in the business world?
So I believe, well, staying ahead of all these changes that I talked about, internally, external forces, and internal, and you know that means to be able to pivot at a moment's notice. But in all seriousness, marketing's most fundamental role is and always has been to understand markets and consumers better than anyone else around, period. We need to be the voice of the customer within our businesses. And I don't think that role of marketing has changed. A lot of things around it have changed, but the fundamental role of marketing remains the same today as it always has been.
So, despite all of that change and disruption, that fundamental role is the same today.
I believe so, yes.
How far do you think, though, marketing has changed from its origins as an art and science to something that maybe looks a bit different today?
So if you do a Google search on the term "is marketing an art or science," you'll get over a half a billion, 500 million search results. So that's an indication of really just how pervasive the art and science debate and paradigm has become in our thinking. And in the past, the view of marketing as merely a combination of art and science, I believe, is no longer enough in
Mm.
today's customer centric, hyperspeed world. Of course, creative and artistic sensibilities and analytics and measurement, those still inform our marketing practices. But I think they've been superseded by the need for real time customer insight and speed to market. Frankly, customers don't care about what blend of art and science goes into our marketing strategies and programs. They don't care that you do A B or ABCD testing. All they really care about is how well our messages hit a nerve and fulfill a need. So I
Mm.
think today's marketers need a 24/7 customer lifeline that we can turn into action faster than our competitors. And that's why I think insight and agility have become the new marketing art and science, if you will.
And what does that 24/7 customer insight look like in practice?
Well, that in practice, it really has three core ingredients. And I think those ingredients are insight, as I mentioned, plus agility, plus creativity. So I have a little fun with this, and I call that the marketing flexology elixir. So the recipe goes something like this: combine equal parts insight and agility, shake well and often, and serve it with a splash. Because I do think that splash of creativity is really what breaks through the clutter.
Mm. So it's not being too sort of fixed. That creativity is adding the extra spice to your marketing mix.
Absolutely, no, that's totally true. But you have to have that insight and agility, that lifeline to your customers, and then be able to turn it into action faster than anybody else. And that the fundamental role of marketing, as I mentioned earlier, and it continues today. But the creativity is important, especially with today's short attention span consumer.
Is that ability to turn the insight into action, I guess, easier for smaller firms? And many of the firms that we work with are small financial planning practices than it is maybe for larger firms who are a bit harder to, get to market, to make changes, to be creative.
Yeah, I do think so. I think if you were a solopreneur or a small business, those insights, you see those insights up close and personal every day in your customer interactions, and you can make changes on a day to day basis based on the input you receive. They like one thing, you do more of it. They don't like something, you do less of it. I think the
Mm.
larger a firm becomes, from a small, medium to large corporate enterprise, the harder it is to aggregate all those customer insights into a centralized location reservoir, if you will, where they can be accessed throughout the organization. So yeah, it becomes difficult,
Mm.
and that's why customer experience or voice of the customer programs become established in some companies as a way of unlocking some of those nuggets of customer insight within the organization.
Mm. Tell us a bit the business first mindset you talk about in the book, and why cultivating that particular trait is a really important thing that a dynamic marketing leader can do.
Yeah, I'm a real firm believer in business first. And let me give you a little color on that first, Martin. So I spent 14 years at the Hewlett Packard, or as you would say, Hewlett Packard Company. And over those 14 years, I served six different chief executive officers, CEOs, and six different CMOs. And each brought a unique perspective, set of strategies, and they each brought change. And really, from that experience, it was like working for six different companies. And it
Mm.
allowed me to really receive a keen insight into how differently marketing leaders manage their organizations. When I was tapped to lead several company wide transformations, They were painful, but they were very enlightening. And through that, I observed, that the career winners, if you will, in these upheavals, they all shared a common trait, and I called it a business first mindset. It's the leaders who place their companies and their customers first before their teams, before themselves. They really came out of these transformations relatively unscathed. On the other hand, those me first leaders who thought about the transformation or changes that were needed, who put their own careers and their own teams ahead of their companies, ahead of their customers, they were the ones that suffered the biggest upset in terms of their budgets, their teams, their standing, and even their jobs. So that's why I say cultivating a business first mindset. This trait is by far the most important thing a dynamic marketing leader can do. It may
Mm.
feel a little counterintuitive, but it really does work.
And CEOs, CMOs do tend to have quite short lifespans in companies. So I guess that a business first mindset allows you to take that longer term view. But does that, though, result in becoming complacent sometimes?
Yes, it could. I do think, though, if you're always receptive and always um, to avoid the status quo, you have to always be thinking both short term and long term and
Mm.
really doing what's best for the customer, best for business, right? Because if you don't have a solvent business, you're not going to have a solvent career. So if you really focus on what's best for the business, what's best for your customers or business, and then what's the right thing to do for your team, but always last, what's right for you. So complacency is a problem. It's pervasive throughout successful companies, but that's why I think building that foundation allows you to pivot. Is really key.
Mm. You've developed the marketing flexology management framework. So, in broad terms, can you tell us a bit about how that works?
Yeah, so I call it both a mindset and a tool set. So we just talked about the importance of developing that mindset, that business first mindset, and a set of traits around that. And the tool set really is a combination of principles, dials, and tools that enable a business leader, a marketing leader to build a strong foundation so you can weather most business fluctuations, management changes, both forces internally and externally. I think a strong marketing foundation allows marketing teams to operate more intelligently, more efficiently, more productively. But it most importantly, this a strong marketing foundation, which I call the marketing flexology management framework, allows you to absorb, to pivot, and then to bounce back from unplanned change without slowing down or losing your job.
Mm. That's so important, isn't it?
Yeah.
Something we talked about briefly before we started recording was this, how busy we get and our dwindling supply of attention. And perhaps that's one of the biggest challenges faced by both individuals. So we talked about it in the context of me saying that I find it hard, I think, to sit down and do a big project like a book now because there's
Hmm.
so much going on. But also businesses find that dwindling supply of attention very challenging. So how can we, I guess, become sharper with our creativity and break through that attention deficit?
No, that's a great question, and it's so true. Attention spans are dwindling. We're attention deficit, most of us, and it might be
Mm.
blamed on technology. It might be blamed by other things, but the fact remains. In fact, Microsoft in 2015 they did a study and they found that since the mobile revolution began, people now generally lose concentration after 8 seconds. That's down from 12 seconds in 2000. And 8 seconds is 1 second less than the attention span of a goldfish. I mean, it's crazy, right? I mean, it's crazy. So, how do we break through this? I go back to keen customer insight, the ability to turn that insight into action faster than our competitors, along with, some clutter busting creativity. As for, what can you do to sharpen the creativity sauce, so to speak? A lot has been written on how to foster creativity within your company, your team, and yourself. And most of it all starts with believing that you can become more creative. If you ask people, "Are you creative?" half the people say, "Oh, I'm not very creative." But you have to believe
Mm.
that you can become more creative. That's not something that you lose in adulthood, and then practicing it on a daily basis. And the things you can do on a daily basis are free, to ignite your creative spark. And they're everything from, and there's books written on this, practicing mental imagery, from asking more questions, trying new things, reading more fiction, practicing solitude, daydreaming, doodling. So I don't know if there's a magic answer to that, but I think just focusing, acknowledging it, believing it, and then focusing on it, will indeed, make us more creative.
You talk in the book as well about 6 core marketing processes that leaders have to have in place. So could you tell us about a couple of those?
Sure. So, as a general rule of thumb, I found that most marketers hate process. It's just something they despise. And so that's why I recommend keeping any process that you do put in place lightweight, simple, and limited to a handful. So, in
Right.
essence, really all you need is, I call it 6 processes. And all you need is a process to help you coordinate marketing activities, to allocate marketing resources, to efficiently orchestrate your outbound activities, to calculate the effect of your marketing programs, and to help you remediate any exceptions or disagreements that might occur along the way. And then, lastly, a process to help you celebrate wins, milestones, and accomplishments. And that's it. I think that's really all you need. I think we overcomplicate it. So you need to coordinate, allocate, orchestrate, calculate, remediate, and celebrate. And you should be in very good shape if you have those processes in place.
That sounds like a very simple but very effective way to approach marketing. And I guess the calculate one is something that people often find quite challenging, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, because especially when you get into the brand and demand equation, right? How do you measure? What are the KPIs? How do you prove your effectiveness? And I'm sure your audience as financial planners are always very keen on, understanding, what are the metrics? What's the ROI behind that investment?
Mm. From a marketing perspective, what do you think is within our control and what do we have to accept is, I guess, entirely out of our control?
So I think we talked earlier a little bit about some of the external and internal forces, the management change, the shakeups, the change in model, the change in market. The winds of change are sometimes and largely out of our control. But I do think as marketers, there are 4 things that we do own and control. And we have and we can choose. And they are our people, our programs, our budgets, and our agencies. And how we
Mm.
fine tune those 4 dials or levers, really often determines how seamlessly we can react to unplanned change. I won't go into detail on each of those dials necessarily, but there's a common theme among them. And, and that is, in order to achieve a high level of marketing agility, you have to minimize fixed cost and maximize our variable costs. And I've seen time and time again through marketing transformation where people are asked to trim 20% off their budgets or trim 10% of their headcount, and they find everything's locked contractually into long term commitments. And they have nowhere to turn but their revenue producing demand generation programs, which is absolutely the wrong place to cut. So that's what I would say are in our control, those 4 dials.
Mm. And maximizing variable costs, I guess one way to do that is to outsource marketing activity rather than build a big function in house.
Absolutely, that's a very good way of doing it. That keeps fixed costs small and maximizes variable costs. Another way is to avoid agency retainers, because those could be
Mm.
locked up, and to be very strategic about the agencies and the overhead they charge. I think that's a very key point. But you have a choice, right? What agencies you pick and how you manage them, what kind of relationship or retainer basis they're on or fee basis they're on. Those are all within a marketer's control.
No, absolutely. How and what does it take to transition into a marketing flexology mindset and tool set? What are the steps people would follow?
So I say it's the mindset. It's adopting the mindset. It's adopting the tool set. And I say it's about 90 days. And so in my book, I do provide a week by week action plan where I help business and marketing professions transition to the new capability and management framework, if you will. And I go step by step. Step 1, you put this in place. Step 2, you put this in place. Step 3, focus on the dials. Step 4, here are the tools, etc. So it's a
Mm.
it's a documented, um, very robust, document, proven model that I've really built from 30 years of personal experience on the front lines of some of the largest Fortune global companies and from leading multiple marketing transformations. So I know it works because I've used it and it's worked for me.
Engelina, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. Before you go, where can we learn more about the book and get hold of a copy?
Oh, thank you for asking. So, yes, Marketing Flexology, How to Outsmart Change and Future-Proof Your Career. It launches next week, October 16th, and it's available from a number of fine establishments like Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, IndieBound, and others. And you can find me at marketingflexology.com. And thank you, Martin, for allowing me to share my message.
No worries at all. We'll make sure we put in the show notes for this episode links to the book, links to your profile and things and websites so our listeners can find you easily. But thank you for your time.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you to Engelina for joining me in this episode. Do check out her book. It's called Marketing Flexology, How to Outsmart Change and Future-Proof Your Career. There's a link to the book in the show notes for this episode, which you can find at bamfordmedia.co.uk/podcast. Bamford Media are the creative agency for financial planners, wealth managers, and retail financial services providers. Our work helps drive engagement and retain ideal clients by creating innovative and authentic content. Here at Bamford Media, we make audio podcasts and flash briefings, engaging websites that convert, white papers, blogs and articles, videos, social media posts, and much more. Coming up next week, as we continue with Season 1 of the Financial Planner Marketing Playbook, it's another solo cast from me, where I take a deep dive into some seriously effective ways to generate new client inquiries. We want the Financial Planner Marketing Playbook to become the go-to marketing podcast for financial planners, wealth managers, and retail financial services providers. You can find out more about the podcast and subscribe to receive all future episodes at bamfordmedia.co.uk/podcast. Thank you for listening to this episode, and I look forward to sharing with you next week my thoughts on generating client inquiries. Until then, stay engaging, innovative, and authentic.